Welcome to today's deep dive. We are turning our focus toward a rather unconventional source today.
Yeah, quite different from our usual material.
Right. Usually we're sifting through these incredibly lengthy research papers or, complex data sets. But today we are examining a single, highly focused educational text.
It's surprisingly short.
It really is. It is a document titled y3.txt, which translates to script 3. And we're going to be looking specifically at a subsection called 3 Weekend Plans.
And it's a fascinating pivot for us because, well, the text itself is exceptionally brief. I mean, it clocks in at roughly 80 words total.
Just 80 words.
Yeah, exactly. The document is designed for English language learners who are tuning into an educational platform called the DFY Channel.
Right, hosted by an instructor identified simply as Jack.
Exactly. And on the surface, it reads like a very rudimentary kindergarten primer.
It totally does. The language is stripped down to the absolute bare basics, but our mission today isn't to just read the script to you.
No, that would be a very short deep dive.
Right. We want to deconstruct the pedagogical framework underneath it. We want to explore how a text this brief utilizes these established theories of cognitive science and linguistics to teach. Not just vocabulary, but syntactic structure and cultural rhythm.
To really understand the mechanics at play here, we need to look at the architecture of the lesson itself.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So Jack structures the instruction as a closed loop. He moves the learner through 3 distinct phases. You have passive reception, then active production, and finally contextual reinforcement.
It's like a microcosm of formal language acquisition.
Exactly. Neatly packaged into a micro-narrative.
So jumping into the first main section of the source, the structural block labeled short story.
The architecture of anticipation.
Right. It opens with a very standard ESL phrasing. It says, "It is Friday today."
Yes.
On its face, it's just a temporal marker, just grounding the listener. But looking at the rest of the text, setting this lesson specifically on a Friday seems to serve a very specific cognitive function for the learner.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
In language instruction, you generally want to tie abstract vocabulary to high arousal emotional states.
To aid retention, right?
Precisely. Friday represents anticipation for most working adults or students. By grounding the lesson here, Jack isn't just teaching the English word for the 5th day of the week. He's actually borrowing the learner's natural, real-world anticipation to make the vocabulary stick.
That's brilliant, actually.
It is. And he follows it immediately with the sentence, "I think about the weekend."
Which establishes a psychological baseline for the rest of the text.
Right.
But I have to ask, is this narrative approach actually more effective for an early learner than, say, teaching immediate present tense actions?
What do you mean?
Well, a lot of traditional language textbooks start with things like, "I am walking" or "I am eating," right in the present moment, pointing to objects in the room.
Oh, sure. That touches on the classic debate between total physical response, or TPR methods, and narrative-based methods. So TPR relies on immediate physical action, which is great for learning basic verbs. But narrative frameworks, like what Jack is doing here by establishing a timeline from Friday into the weekend, they rely on establishing a mental schema.
A mental schema, so tapping into something they already know.
Right. Learners already have a cultural schema for what a weekend is. When you map new vocabulary onto an existing familiar conceptual framework, you lower what linguist Stephen Krashen calls the affective filter.
Ah, the affective filter, meaning the emotional variables that can block language acquisition, like anxiety or boredom.
Correct. If a learner is bored or confused by the context, their brain actually physically struggles to retain the new phones and syntax.
That makes a lot of sense.
So by using the familiar, universally anticipated concept of the weekend, Jack lowers that barrier. The learner understands the feeling of the story before they even parse all the verbs.
Also, if you think about how this would be presented on the DFY channel, you have to imagine Jack's delivery.
Oh, absolutely. The auditory component is huge here.
Right. He's likely using a very calm male voice to further lower that affective filter.
Yes, deliberately soothing.
And keeping his vocal stability right in the middle, around a 50, so it doesn't sound robotic, but remains steady and predictable.
Predictability is key for reducing cognitive load.
Exactly. And prioritizing clarity above all else, maybe at an 80% level, while keeping the speed down to roughly 0.85 of normal conversational pacing.
That specific combination, a calm voice, steady stability, high clarity, and slightly reduced speed, It perfectly complements the psychological grounding of the Friday narrative.
It just makes the whole thing so digestible, which makes sense of how he structures the weekend itself in the text.
The dichotomy of the weekend.
Yes, he sets up a very distinct dichotomy between the 2 days. Saturday is presented as the active peak. Jack says, on Saturday, I will meet my friend. We will eat lunch together.
It is entirely outward-facing.
Right. It focuses on a specific social connection and a communal activity.
The choice of verbs there is highly deliberate. Meet and eat are fundamental survival verbs, but they're contextualized within a social framework.
So it's not just eating to survive, it's eating to connect.
Exactly. And then he provides a counterbalance. The text moves to Sunday, and the shift is stark. He says, on Sunday, I will relax at home.
It is a complete reversal of Saturday's energy.
What's fascinating here is how it acts as a cognitive recovery. From a pedagogical standpoint, Jack is modeling the rhythm of exertion and rest.
A human rhythm.
Right. But linguistically, he is contrasting active external verbs with passive internal ones. Meet and eat involve external objects and other people. Relax is internal and isolated.
So he's teaching the learner how to describe varying states of being.
Yes, wrapping it in the recognizable rhythm of a busy Saturday followed by a quiet Sunday.
And he caps off that short story by bringing it back to the emotional baseline. He states, I am excited for the weekend.
Returning to the anticipation.
So we have the scene set, the vocabulary introduced, and the narrative arc completed. But then the script shifts gears completely. We move into the second structural block of the text, which is labeled Repeat After Me.
This is where the methodology transitions from implicit reception to explicit production.
The mechanics of pedagogy.
Exactly. In the short story phase, the learner is passive. They're decoding comprehensible input. In the Repeat After Me section, the demand on the learner's working memory changes entirely.
I notice he strips the sentences down to just the subject and verb here.
He does.
Because the original text was, on Saturday, I will meet my friend. But the repetition prompt is simply, I will meet my friend. The temporal marker is just gone.
It's completely removed.
And we will eat lunch together drops the modifier and just becomes, we will eat lunch. My first thought was that he's just trying to save time, but is there a cognitive reason for removing the contextual dressing during the speaking phase?
There absolutely is. It connects directly to cognitive load theory, specifically how working memory functions in adult language learners.
Okay, tell me more about that.
When you are asking a learner to physically produce new phones, to actually move their mouth and vocal cords to speak a foreign language, their working memory is heavily taxed.
Because they are focusing on pronunciation, not just meaning.
Precisely. If Jack asked them to repeat the entire complex sentence, on Saturday, I will meet my friend, the learner might stumble over the prepositional phrase, on Saturday.
And then they lose the thread of the actual action.
Right. They lose the mental bandwidth required to properly conjugate, I will meet. By removing the temporal markers and the adverbs, Jack isolates the syntactic core. Subject, verb, object. I will meet my friend.
That is so efficient.
He is ensuring the learner masters the foundational mechanics of the language before layering the context back on.
It is a form of syntactic simplification, but there is another layer to this repetition phase that seems crucial.
What did you notice?
The original audience of the DFY channel is being asked to speak these phrases out loud. I will meet my friend. I will relax at home. By forcing the repetition of the first-person pronoun, I, the learner, is being asked to temporarily embody Jack's narrative.
Oh, that's a great observation. That introduces the concept of embodied cognition into the lesson.
Embodied cognition?
Yes. There is a significant body of research suggesting that speaking in the first person engages different neural pathways than third-person observation.
Because you're taking ownership of the action.
Right. When a learner says, I will relax, they are neurologically adopting the action. For a brief moment, Jack's weekend plans become the learner's weekend plans.
Which bridges the gap between abstract vocabulary and lived reality. You aren't just learning how Jack lives, you are practicing the words you will eventually use to describe your own life.
Exactly. It makes it personal.
Which moves us to the third structural block in the script, called listening again.
This section reveals a really sophisticated understanding of how linguistic reinforcement works. Well, a less experienced instructor might simply replay the original short story exactly as it was presented in step 1.
Just loop it back.
Right. But rote memorization, the kind favored by mid-20th century behaviorist models, has diminishing returns. Jack offers a final pass of the information, but the text subtly morphs.
It is almost like a remix of the original track. Let's trace those changes.
Mm-hmm.
The very first line of the lesson was, "It is Friday today." In the listening again section, it becomes simply, "It is Friday."
Scaffolding is beginning to fade.
Scaffolding.
Yes, in instructional design, you provide heavy context initially, and then slowly remove it to test if the core concept holds. The temporal context of today has already been firmly established in the learner's mind.
So they don't need the reminder.
Exactly. It is now redundant, so Jack drops it.
He keeps the line, I think, about the weekend, but then the weekend plans shift again. The original story read, "On Saturday, I will meet my friend. We will eat lunch together." The new version adopts that stripped-down format we saw in the repetition exercise. It says, "I will meet my friend. We will eat lunch."
He is bridging the gap between the complex original story and the simplified production exercise. He is showing the learner that the conversational, stripped-down version of the sentence is just as valid as the formal, context-heavy version.
That makes total sense. But the most significant change, at least from a grammatical standpoint, happens in the final sentence describing the weekend.
The Sunday sentence.
Right. In the original story, Jack says, "On Sunday, I will relax at home." He uses the future tense. But in the listening again section, he alters it to, "Sunday, I relax at home."
Yes.
Why introduce a tense shift like that right at the end of the lesson?
That shift from the formal future tense, "I will relax," to the simple present, "I relax," is a major leap in language acquisition. It introduces the concept of the habitual aspect.
The habitual aspect, meaning it's a habit.
Right. Sunday I relax at home doesn't just refer to a specific plan for the upcoming weekend. It implies that this is a routine. It means that, as a general rule, Sundays are for relaxation.
It takes a specific future intention and turns it into a general fact of life.
It also tests whether the learner is relying on rote memorization or actual semantic understanding.
Because if they just memorize the sounds, the change would throw them off.
Exactly. If a learner only memorized the string of sounds, "I will relax," the new phrasing, "I relax," might confuse them. By presenting this subtle variation, Jack ensures that the underlying concept has been grasped, regardless of the exact syntactical dressing.
That's fascinating.
This is the difference between simple repetition and genuine cognitive reinforcement.
I also notice he completely drops the final line of the original story. The listening again section doesn't include the phrase, "I am excited for the weekend."
The emotion is now implicit in the text.
Implicit.
By the time the learner reaches this final phase, they have processed the anticipation of Friday, the social engagement of Saturday, and the cognitive recovery of Sunday.
They've felt the weekend.
Yes. The excitement doesn't need to be stated explicitly anymore. It is woven into the subtext of the vocabulary. Jack trusts that the feeling has been communicated alongside the words.
Which brings us to the final moments of the script. The section is simply titled, "Ending." And Jack signs off with, "Great work. See you in the next lesson."
The psychology of the closed loop is vital in adult education.
Because it can be intimidating.
Very. Adult learners often struggle with the vulnerability of acquiring a new language. It can be a frustrating, ego-bruising process. Providing immediate, definitive, positive reinforcement saying, "Great work," validates the cognitive effort the learner just expended.
And the phrase, "see you in the next lesson," creates an ongoing relationship.
It does.
It closes the immediate instructional loop while simultaneously opening the door for the next one, which encourages habit formation in the learner.
It is a textbook application of intermittent reinforcement. You complete the task, you receive validation, and you are immediately queued up for the next challenge.
So we've taken this incredibly brief 80-word script and examined the machinery underneath it. We've looked at how it uses narrative to lower the affective filter. We've looked at how it isolates syntax to manage cognitive load during speaking exercises, and how it uses subtle grammatical variations to reinforce semantic understanding. But I want to pivot slightly and look at the actual content Jack chose to focus on.
The curriculum design choices are definitely worth exploring. When an instructor sits down to write an introductory language script, they are making a value judgment about what information is most critical for survival or integration.
Think about your own schedule for a moment. Think about the elemental rhythm Jack presents to you. He could have taught his students how to talk about commuting to work or buying groceries or asking for directions to the train station.
Right, those are all standard, highly practical ESL topics.
But he didn't start there.
No, he prioritized the weekend. He prioritized the anticipation of free time.
Out of all the things a person needs to say in a new language, Jack decides that expressing the desire to see a friend, the act of sharing a meal, and the need to rest at home are the absolute core functional phrases.
It's a very human-centric approach.
It really is. Look at your own week. Does it reflect that balance? Do you have that outward-facing connection on a Saturday, followed by the deliberate isolation and recovery of a Sunday?
It's a good question to ask yourself.
In an era that often glorifies constant productivity and optimization, it's interesting to see a foundational educational text treat rest and friendship as the primary building blocks of a person's routine.
It raises a very compelling question about what we view as essential communication.
What do you mean?
When we strip human language down to its most basic, learnable parts, as this curriculum meticulously does for the audience of the DFY channel, what do we reveal about core human priorities?
That's a great point.
Does the structure of a beginner's language script accidentally expose that, beneath the complexities of modern scheduling, the most universally understood concepts are simply the anticipation of social connection and the profound necessity of rest?
That is something worth reflecting on as you consider both the mechanics of how we learn and the content of what we choose to say. We hope this exploration of Jack's script has provided a new lens through which to view both language acquisition and the structure of your own time. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.